What's going on, guys? This is AndrewChicken and welcome back to another video. In this one I'll be going over how the comeback mechanic works for Siege, since it's an extremely important aspect of how Siege works that has a surprisingly huge impact on the game. I'll also be briefly explaining a few other pretty basic Siege mechanics that can really help you if you're brand new to the game, but I'll mainly be explaining how this comeback mechanic works and how to strategize around it. Now before we get into the video, I just want to give a quick announcement about the tournament I'm hosting in less than a month. On July 6th, I'll be hosting a tournament with the help of my staff on Discord that is open to anybody of any rank. There will be two brackets, one for players from Bronze to Platinum 4, and one for players from Platinum 3 to Grandmasters, and there will be a 200 crystal prize for the members of the winning teams. You don't need to have a team to sign up though, because if you don't have a team to play with, then you'll be placed on a team with other players of a similar skill level. The registration form and rules are both linked in the description if you want to check it out, and it should be a ton of fun. If you have any questions, be sure to check out my Discord server, which is linked in the description. But anyways, without further ado, let's get straight into the video. Now, before I can explain the comeback mechanic, it's important that I explain a little bit about how Siege works for those of you who are new to the game. In Siege, the goal is to be the first to reach 4 points, and a point is awarded for capturing the objective, pushing the payload, and successfully defending an enemy push. However, you cannot win the game on a defense, so if you've got 3 points and you defend a push, you will not receive an additional point, and will have to capture the objective to win. The objective is captured at the same rate for your team no matter how many people stand on it, so the capture progression will be the same whether 1 person or 5 people stand on the objective. Each member of your team gains 300 credits each time your team captures an objective, but no credits for defending or pushing the payload. This is extremely important, because if your team captures the objective 3 times but doesn't push the payload any of those times, then going into the final round where both teams need to capture the objective to win, your team is going into the battle with a 900 credit advantage over the other team. Now, the comeback mechanic is one of the most important mechanics in the game, because it helps to give the losing team a bit of an advantage when it comes to capturing the objective. The comeback mechanic basically increases the rate at which you capture the objective depending on how far behind the enemy team you are. By default, the objective is captured at a rate of 3% per tick, but if your team is behind by 2 points, it captures at a much faster rate of 4% per tick, and if your team is only behind by 1 point, then it alternates between capturing at 3 and 4% per tick. This means that you'll be able to capture the objective much faster than the enemy team if you can successfully push them off the objective, so the enemy team will have to work harder if they want to capture the objective. This mechanic is super important for a variety of reasons. For one thing, it means that if your team does really bad at the start of the game, there's still no reason to give up because your team will have a significant advantage trying to capture the objective going into the second round. Also, this opens up a bit of strategy when trying to get an advantage over the enemy team. Obviously, you want to try as hard as possible to capture the objective, but if you happen to lose the first objective, there are 2 different strategies that you can employ. One that utilizes the comeback mechanic, and one that doesn't. If you don't know about the comeback mechanic and you let your team use a few of their ults to successfully defend the enemy team's push, then the game goes 1-1, with the enemy team having a 300 credit advantage because they captured the objective, and potentially having more ultimates ready than your team. This means that if both teams are pretty closely matched, the enemy team is more likely to capture the objective than your team. If your team keeps using their ultimates to defend the enemy push, then eventually the game will go 3-3, and both teams need to capture the objective to win. However, by this point, the enemy team has a 900 credit advantage over your team from capturing the objective 3 times, and they most likely still have more ultimates ready than your team. This means that the enemy team is most likely to defeat you, which could have been prevented with knowledge of how the comeback mechanic works. Instead of defending the first enemy push by using a few ultimates, it can be a good idea to save all 5 of your team's ults and let them push it so it's 0-2. That way, your team can use all 5 of their ults and the comeback mechanic, which lets you capture at 4% a tick instead of 3% a tick, to easily capture the objective and earn the 300 credits from capturing that I mentioned earlier. From here, your team can save your ults when pushing, and if they fail to push, rinse and repeat using the comeback mechanic and 5 ults to capture 2 more times, bringing the game to 3-3 and giving your team a 600 credit advantage over the enemy team. Then, you could use this advantage to capture the final objective and win the game. Now, obviously this strategy is not perfect. If you're not in a 5-man party, it's very likely that a toxic teammate or 2 could just give up if your team fails to defend the first push and goes 0-2. And matchmaking is horrible at making perfectly even teams, so the enemy team might genuinely be better than your team, making it difficult to capture the objective even with the comeback mechanic. On the flip side, your team could be much better than the enemy team, in which case there's no point in prolonging the game by trying to utilize the comeback mechanic. However, it's still helpful to know how to utilize the comeback mechanic like this in situations where you can possibly get an advantage over the enemy team. You can also utilize the comeback mechanic when your team is winning to try and prevent the enemy team from gaining an advantage. For instance, if your team does extremely well at the beginning of the game and successfully pushes the payload, bringing the game to 2-0, but then the enemy team captures the objective because of the comeback mechanic, what your team could do instead of trying their hardest to defend the payload is to save their ultimates and possibly let the enemy team push the payload, bringing the game to 2-2. Now, neither team has the advantage of the comeback mechanic, and since each team captured the objective once, both teams gained 300 credits, so neither team has a credit advantage either. This essentially levels the playing field, preventing the enemy team from using the comeback mechanic to get a credit advantage over your team. And with the 5 ultimates your team saved, capturing the objective should be fairly easy and can very well snowball into a game-ending push. Of course, this strategy isn't always perfect either. While your team may have done extremely well at the beginning of the game, this may have just been because the enemy team needed a bit of time to warm up, and they might come back and totally crush you. Or if you're not playing in a 5-man, your team's morale might be a bit crushed if you let the enemy team make a complete comeback so it's 2-2. This could cause your team to become a bit tilted and start playing poorly as a result. Now, with both of these strategies, I am not saying that you should simply give the enemy team a free point by letting them push with 0 resistance. What I am saying is that if it would be advantageous for your team to let the enemy team push the payload all the way through, your team should save their ultimates so you have an easier time capturing the objective in the next round with the comeback mechanic and potentially a credit advantage. Also, no matter what happens, if the enemy team is about to push the payload and they already have 3 points, it is definitely best to try and prevent them from winning by using your ultimates, since your team might still have a chance to capture the objective even if a few ultimates are down. So anyways, that's the end of this video. Did this video help you understand how the comeback mechanic works in Paladins? Let me know in the comment section down below, and also be sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe if you want to see more content like this from me. Also, make sure to check me out on Twitch, since I'll be streaming all kinds of Paladins content in the future. And finally, make sure to join my Discord server if you want to pick up tips, leave suggestions, and become a part of our active community. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.